I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily Week in Review. Health Canada's chief medical advisor says the regulator received additional information from Johnson & Johnson over the weekend about its COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Supriya Sharma says Health Canada is hoping to approve the drug in the next couple of weeks, but that is dependent on the information presented by the company. If approved, it would be Canada's fourth COVID-19 vaccine after AstraZeneca's candidate was given the go-ahead on Friday. Deliveries from the British-Swedish company could begin arriving in Canada sometime this week. Days after Health Canada approved the use of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine, doses could begin arriving this week. The Public Health Agency of Canada is currently only expecting delivery of about 445,000 doses from Pfizer-BioNTech this week. But a senior government official tells the Canadian press the first shots from AstraZeneca could start arriving in Canada on Wednesday, though the shipment has not been confirmed. AstraZeneca's vaccine is the third to get the green light from the health regulator. Travelers say they are paying the price for the chaotic rollout of Canada's new COVID-19 travel regulations, waiting for hours to book the hotel quarantine stays required for those flying into the country from abroad. Under the new program, travelers must show proof of a 3-day hotel booking before boarding their flight to Canada. The only way to book a room is through a dedicated phone line run by the Public Health Agency of Canada. Health experts in Canada are opposing so-called vaccine tourism. They say executives who engage in it show both an ethical disregard for those less fortunate and a lack of business insight. Their comments came after the head of the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, Mark Machin, stepped down after admitting to traveling to Dubai to receive a COVID-19 vaccine. Experts say decisions to travel abroad for vaccines also raise questions about the culture that a person expects to cultivate in their company. NDP House Leader Peter Julian thinks both the Liberals and Conservatives are angling for a federal election this year. He says the Liberals are holding back important legislation so that they can claim they can't get things done in the minority parliament. Government House Leader Pablo Rodriguez says Conservatives have forced delays on bills authorizing billions in pandemic-related aid and special measures for safely conducting an election. The Tories, for their part, say the Liberals aren't focusing on the right measures to bring before the House. Lawyers for a Chinese tech executive wanted in the U.S. on fraud charges will be back in a Vancouver courtroom today to argue over the admission of evidence in her extradition case. Meng Wanzhou's defense team alleges the evidence will prove that international bank HSBC was aware of the relationship between Huawei and Skycom, a subsidiary of the technology company. Ms. Meng was arrested at Vancouver's airport in December of 2018 at the request of U.S. authorities over claims that she misrepresented her relationship, putting the bank at risk of violating U.S. sanctions against Iran. A doctor from northern Alberta has been nominated as the first Indigenous president-elect of the Canadian Medical Association. Dr. Alika Lafontaine of the Grande Prairie is set to be confirmed as the CMA's president-elect at an annual general meeting in August, and then his presidency would begin in August 2022. The association's presidency is rotated among the provinces, and Alberta's doctors chose Dr. Lafontaine, who has Anishinaabe, Cree, Métis, and Pacific Islander ancestry. The CMA says Dr. Lafontaine co-led the Indigenous Health Alliance from 2013 to 2017. A WestJet spokeswoman says negotiations are ongoing with the union representing its pilots following Friday's announcement of an undisclosed number of layoffs. Airline spokeswoman Morgan Bell says the layoff notices are ahead of the expiration of a memorandum of agreement on March 31st. The airline announced on February 5th that it would lay off 120 cabin crew members as of March 2nd, blaming the measure on the lack of flights to Mexico and the Caribbean. BMO Capital Markets hosts its 30th Global Metals and Mining Conference this week. The online event runs from March 1st through to the 5th, and shares in metals and mining companies have rebounded sharply from the lows of last March at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The final season of Schitt's Creek is ending on a golden note. The Canadian sitcom won Best Television Series in a Musical or Comedy in last night's Golden Globes, and Catherine O'Hara took home Best Television Actress in a Musical or Comedy. The series was nominated for 3 other awards, but ultimately lost out. The series, about a wealthy family that loses everything and moves to a small town, wrapped up its 6-season run last year. Stay with us. This past week, we began a campaign digging deeper into the impending cancellation of the Line 5 pipeline in Ontario and what that means for Canada's energy sector in the future, as well as how this affects the average Canadian's wallet. We spoke in depth with Daniel Smith, Western Canada commentator on this pipeline issue. That and more news from Canada and around the world coming up next on the Forum Daily Week in Review. So stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back. Energy experts are sounding the alarm over the impending cancellation of Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline by May 2021, a move made by Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer in November, who argues that the project is an environmental risk to the Great Lakes. However, Canada has a lot to lose if this 1,038-kilometer project is terminated. Line 5 transports oil and natural gas from Western Canada through the U.S. to Ontario and Quebec refineries. The pipeline is a critical source of crude oil in the two provinces, contributing 66% of the crude consumed in Quebec alone. According to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the pipeline's closure could lead to significant disruptions in fuel supply for Ontario and Quebec, leading to sky-high energy costs and the need for new transportation infrastructure. Well, to talk more on Line 5's impending cancellation and its effects on Canada's energy sector and economy, we are joined by Ms. Daniel Smith, former Leader of the Opposition and Western Canada commentator. Welcome to Forum Daily, Ms. Smith.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So today we're looking for more of a general overview of the Line 5 pipeline project, but we will go through this in more detail throughout the week with you. So let's start with this, ma'am. Where does the pipeline start and where does it end, and how much oil travels through it each day?
All of these pipeline systems are interconnected. So from a broad perspective, it essentially takes oil and natural gas liquids from Edmonton through to Sarnia with a detour through the United States. So this particular leg of the pipeline starts in Superior, Wisconsin, goes through the Straits of Mackinac, so it goes down through Michigan, which is the important part, and then comes back up to Sarnia. And this is where Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer gets her authority to cancel the permits for the line. Now, it strikes me that no one is taking this as seriously as they probably should. I've spoken to an analyst recently in Washington, and they're absolutely convinced that Gretchen Whitmer not only has the authority and power to cancel this permit, but that she will do it, which is going to create a massive disruption, particularly for Ontario and Quebec. And it's going to have a huge impact not only on the refinery, but also on the consumers who rely on the products that come out of it.
And in terms of this transportation infrastructure, if we lost the pipeline, do we have any other ways of getting the fuel to Ontario and Quebec?
Not very good ways. We have Line 7 and Line 8, as I mentioned, all the pipeline systems are interconnected, but they're also full. So there isn't the ability to bring on new capacities, 540,000 barrels per day. So it's a significant volume. And so if you can't bring it in through another pipeline, what are your other options? Well, you could bring it in by truck or train, which is not particularly efficient for that kind of volume. The other option is by tanker. So you would have the product transported to Superior, Wisconsin, and then you would bring it in by tanker. That's going to create more problems, though, because if they have a problem with a pipeline that has gone through the Straits of Mackinac, they're going to have a problem with tankers going through the Straits as well. So that the other problem with the Great Lakes is that you can't navigate them year round. You'll end up with disruption in the winter months. So you may end up with the timing on this canceled in May. You may end up having a window where you can secure other supply. But once you hit winter, you're going to end up with problems again. So this is going to be a big problem for Quebec because with the interconnection of the pipelines, this one feeds Line 9, as you've mentioned, and that is responsible for 66% of their supply. So they're going to have to return to some of the traditional ways that they have been receiving their product in the past before that reversal happened by bringing it in from offshore. And so we have to ask this question is, do we believe in North American energy security? Do we believe in Canadian energy security? Or do we want to become more and more reliant on international players? This is going to have a huge impact on the way in which we in Canada end up getting our future product for Ontario and Quebec.
Now, I really want to bring this back to our viewers at home. If this pipeline was canceled, what do you estimate would happen to the price of fuel for businesses and regular Canadian citizens, ma'am? We've got about a minute left.
It's tough to imagine that you can take this amount of supply out and not have an immediate impact on the cost, because there will be some that is continued to be produced. But would you be surprised if it ended up doubling the cost of gasoline and diesel? I wouldn't be surprised. It also puts a disruption into aviation fuel to supply Toronto's Pearson Airport. When people start traveling again, they'll see an additional fuel surcharge. And there just really isn't a good way to get a replacement for propane, which is going to be a big problem for farmers as well as for those who use that for home heating. So it will have a very real and immediate impact on consumers until they're able to find another source of supply.
And Ms. Smith, about 30 seconds left, but what can our Canadian viewers do to put their voice and their concerns out there in terms of this pipeline cancellation?
One of the main things is to put pressure on the Americans. Joe Biden has the ability. Gretchen Whitmer was his campaign co-chair. They have a good relationship. So if Joe Biden can be persuaded that this is not only bad for us, but it's bad for them. I mean, Michigan relies on the refineries for their propane. And if they have a disruption in their propane, it's going to hurt Michigan residents.
The BC government says it has issued 1,366 violation tickets under its ongoing state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic. That includes 199 tickets worth $2,300 each to owners or organizers breaking restrictions on gathering events, adding up to nearly $460,000 in total. 101 tickets totaling nearly $330,000 have been issued to people breaking federal quarantine rules. Alberta's health minister says the province may follow British Columbia in extending the time between COVID-19 vaccine doses. Tyler Shandro says a committee of COVID-19 experts is analyzing emerging data and a decision is coming. The BC government says it will extend the wait between first and second doses to 4 months to get more people vaccinated overall in a shorter time period. BC based its decision on data from the United Kingdom, Israel, and Quebec that shows the first dose of vaccines is 90% effective. Saskatchewan may follow British Columbia's lead in delaying a second dose of COVID-19 vaccine to speed up immunizations. The province says information from BC, Quebec, and the United Kingdom suggests a first shot effectively protects against the novel coronavirus. The Moe government says it hopes a national committee that provides guidance on immunizations will support waiting up to 4 months to give people a second dose. If that happens, the province could speed up how soon residents get their first shot. Meanwhile, the Saskatchewan Hockey Association may put a team into the penalty box after a Facebook video was posted of the club playing a game. The video appears to show the under-18 Estevan Wolves participating in a 4-on-4 scrimmage with a referee and no social distancing on the benches. Kelly McClintock, the Hockey Association's general manager, says the video suggests a lack of respect for COVID-19 public health orders, and a disciplinary committee will look at what sort of punishment is appropriate. A promise by the Manitoba government to provide housing to 250 homeless Winnipeggers has been praised as a good first step. Families Minister Rochelle Squires says the government will give $2.5 million to the Manitoba Nonprofit Housing Association over the next 2 years. The group and Homelessness Winnipeg says housing is needed for more than 1,500 people, and there is a huge need for Indigenous-led housing supports. The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board says the housing market remained on fire in February, with the average price surpassing $1 million for the first time. The Real Estate Board says February home sales reached over 10,000, a 52.5% jump from the over 7,000 homes sold in the same month last year. The average selling price was up by 14.9% to over $1 million, an increase from over 910,000 in 2020, as price changes were higher in the 905 area code than in the 416. Ontario's health minister says the province will soon share an updated vaccine plan, factoring in today's expected arrival of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Christine Elliott says they are just waiting for guidance from Ottawa on potentially extending the time between the first and second doses of the approved vaccines, Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna. She says extending the gap to 4 months would make a considerable difference in the vaccine rollout. Quebec's premier is scheduled to announce updated COVID-19 restrictions. François Legault says the changes will go into effect after March 8th. The move comes after the province reported the lowest daily number of new COVID-19 infections since September. Health Minister Christian Dubé, however, told reporters yesterday that he is scared about the spread of new coronavirus variants, and those concerns will shape future restrictions. Residential sales in metropolitan Montreal fell in February for the first time in 6 years as transactions plunged outside Quebec's largest city. The Quebec Professional Association of Real Estate Brokers says the number of sales decreased 3% from a year earlier to 5,106 homes for the first February decline since 2015. The median price for single-family homes increased 28% to $460,000. Nova Scotia has announced a $7 million rebate program to help the service sector weather the impact of the COVID-19 shutdowns. Premier Ian Rankin says qualified businesses can get a one-time rebate of a portion of their paid property taxes. Nearly 3,300 businesses are eligible, including restaurants and drinking establishments, gym and fitness establishments, hair salons and barber shops, spas, nail salons, and body art establishments. A Nova Scotia judge is giving 2 people alleged to have facilitated the cyberbullying of parents of a missing child time to consider seeking legal counsel. The parents of 3-year-old Dylan Eller says the respondents are responsible for creating Facebook groups that contained accusations that they participated in their son's disappearance. The court action is also seeking to have the groups permanently removed and orders against the creation of any further similar groups. International news coming up next on the Forum Daily Week in Review. So stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back after the break. The power grid manager in Texas has been fired following February's deadly blackouts that left millions of people without electricity and heat for days. The board of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas fired CEO Bill Magnus yesterday, and the company is now under investigation by the U.S. House Oversight Committee. He is the second senior official and the highest-ranking one to lose his job in the wake of one of the worst power outages in American history. More than 4 million customers in Texas lost electricity as the state's power grid buckled in sub-freezing weather. Kuwait says the country's 83-year-old ruling emir has flown to the United States for medical checks just months after ascending the throne. The state-run news agency described the purpose of the emir's visit to the U.S. as the usual medical checkups, without elaborating. Given his age, Sheikh Nawaf's medical trip raises concerns over his health condition, of which little is known. As countries institute airport testing, tracing, and mandatory isolation, Mexican authorities are bragging about the speed at which they let tourists exit the terminal at the resort of Cancun. Mexico's National Immigration Institute said Wednesday that it took tourists an average of only 1 to 2 minutes to enter the country. During peak hours Tuesday, checkpoints at the Cancun airport processed almost 9,000 tourists arriving on dozens of flights. Germany is extending its COVID-19 shutdown by 3 weeks until March 28th. It is easing some restrictions to allow non-essential stores and other businesses to reopen in areas with relatively low infection rates. Chancellor Angela Merkel and the governors of the country's 16 states agreed to measures aimed at balancing concern over the impact of more contagious coronavirus variants with a return to a more normal life. Hundreds of Nigerian girls abducted last week from a boarding school in the country's northwest have been returned to their families as security forces opened fire against people gathered outside the school where the reunions were held. Forces opened fire after stones were thrown at government officials, apparently in frustration at the drawn-out procedure. Anxious and angry parents who were reunited with their girls after 6 days of waiting grabbed their daughters and left, worried about traveling on the area's dangerous roads at night. The International Organization for Migration says at least 20 migrants are dead after smugglers threw 80 overboard during a voyage from Djibouti in East Africa to Yemen. A statement says smugglers started shouting that there were too many on board after the boat with 200 migrants, including children under 18, set off on Wednesday. The IOM says 5 bodies have been recovered. This has happened before as thousands of migrants continue to try and make their way from the Horn of Africa to Yemen and then on to the rich Gulf countries. The coronavirus pandemic has slowed but not stopped the flow. Yemen's Houthi rebels say they have struck a Saudi oil facility in the port city of Jeddah in the latest in a series of airborne assaults that the group has claimed against the kingdom amid the war in Yemen. The Houthi military spokesman tweeted that the rebels fired a cruise missile at the facility. Saudi Arabia's state-owned media did not immediately acknowledge any incident. Flights coming into the Jeddah airport diverted or otherwise flew in circles early Thursday morning without explanation, according to flight tracking data. Demonstrators in Myanmar protesting last month's military coup have returned to the streets, undaunted by the killing of at least 38 people by security forces yesterday. New protests are being held in at least 3 areas of Yangon, the country's largest city, that have been scenes of violence for the past few days. Police again used force to try and disperse the crowds. The UN Security Council has scheduled closed-door consultations tomorrow on calls to reverse the coup and stop the escalating military crackdown. Recent satellite imagery indicates North Korea may be trying to extract plutonium to make more nuclear weapons. The 38 North website says the satellite imagery indicated a coal-fired steam plant at North Korea's main Yongbyon nuclear complex is in operation after a 2-year hiatus. The website says that the plant could be operating to prepare for reprocessing spent fuel or handling radioactive waste. A 7-year-old Alabama girl is helping raise money for her own brain surgery by running a lemonade stand inside her mother's bakery outside Birmingham. Liza Scott wanted to help with expenses after being diagnosed with brain malformations earlier this year. So far, her lemonade stand has taken in more than $12,000 in donations, and an online fundraiser her mom set up has raised over $300,000 more. Liza's first operation is set for Monday in Boston. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news from this past week. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website at thenewsforum.ca, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for updates. Stay tuned for other programs on our network coming up. We have commentary shows on economics, politics, Canadian law, and social issues that affect Canadians from all over the country. All right, thanks for joining us on the Forum Daily Week in Review, and we'll see you again next time. Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.